Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast with Scott and Dan. I'm Scott, and with me is kinda, sorta always, the just murdering morons to my jackass making a mess. It's Dan. Hey, Dan.
Good evening, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show.
Shut the fuck up. There, we can write that down. I cursed first tonight. Yes, always pleasant to hear your voice through my earbuds here.
Yes, my cool voice for podcasting.
All right. Oh, I thought you were going to do an impression of Tweety based on a comment on Facebook.
Yeah, doing an impression of me podcasting. Yeah.
Well, an impression of you podcasting would be you'd be talking like this. You know, basically it's. I would say it sounds like someone, asking for ransom for a kidnapping, except the scene would be I'd have to keep repeating. Wait, what? What? How much? What? Can you call back on another line? Can you text me the ransom request?
I'd like 128 ounces of Heinz ketchup sent me in unmarked paper envelopes.
God. Worst ransom ever. I don't have anything witty set up for you guys. Sorry. So let's just get to the other folks who are on the podcast tonight. We are also we are an entire quartet tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Which I think that's the first time since from maybe a Game of Thrones episode or something. Which maybe you don't want to remember that, but is that the first time it's happened in a year?
It feels like the first time, Scott.
It's been a while.
You got quoting dad rock over there. Anyway, I just learned that term today. I was like, really? Dad rock? Anyway.
I'm a good parent, so I'll take that.
Okay. Anyway, joining Dan and I this evening, we are joined by, well, you've already heard him a few times in his laugh. We are finally joined by Brian. Hey, Brian.
Hey, guys. And Jamie.
Look at Brian taking the bull by the horns and introducing Jamie. Look at that.
Hey, look, George and Ringo were good Beatles too. Okay, you may be John and Paul, but
George is my favorite. So there you go. And let's see, that was about 3 minutes in when the podcast grinded to a halt. Great, awesome.
George, I just don't know if Brian introducing Jamie is maybe grabbing the bull by the horns, maybe. And never mind.
Oh boy! Oh dear! There's so many ways to go on that, and I'll leave that to you because you have a different kind of rapport than I do. Anyways, we are here tonight. Obviously, we are here tonight to talk about Better Call Saul, and namely the last 2 episodes of Better Call Saul. Yeah, once again, we've been a little delinquent, and we really do have 2 pretty significant episodes in the chronology and archival history of the show. So I'm gonna try to skip our usual banter to kick things off. Unless you guys are really dying to talk about the coronavirus, I personally am not. It's a little bit of a sore subject for me. So can we just talk about the TV stuff instead?
Let's talk Saul.
There we go. And like Brian sort of said, because he really, really, really wants to be the co-host. Clearly, let's talk Better Call Saul. It's just first the intro, then that. Come on. he's
Hey,
he's
I've been
totally.
gone a while, man. I've
I
been
know
gone a while.
you're
Okay.
how many all these alphas, and I don't mean that crappy Walking Dead shit either. No, I'm talking about Better Call Saul. So let's start with last week's episode, which was the 7th episode of the season. It was titled JMM. In case anyone didn't figure it out when I did our introductions for me and Dan, that was kind of a takeoff on the JMM thing. And if you didn't figure that out, well, whatever. It was written by Allison Tatlock, who also wrote this season's 50% Off, and it was directed by Melissa Bernstein, who was a long-time executive producer of Better Call Saul, as well as working on *Halt and Catch Fire*, *Rectify*, and, of course, *Breaking Bad*. So much happened in that episode. It's so sad that people are not going to be able to remember it at this point. Where does one begin? We got to begin at the beginning because we can start off with the fact that Jimmy and Kim got married. Now, the story behind this marriage, it's a legal arrangement, so she can't.
Yeah, when I was watching this, I was just like, when we were recording the previous podcast, I thought about mentioning, like, well, maybe they're just getting married so, like, they don't have to testify against each other in court or whatever. I'm just like, no, that's stupid. I'm not even going to bring that up. And then I watched the episode. Fuck.
So let me get this straight. With all the harebrained scheme ideas you've thought of on podcasts over the years, and you said, and I'm like going, no, I don't think so. And again, and you intersperse that with some brilliant foresight as well. I mean, we'll never forget you called Chuck burning in a fire like 2 episodes into season 1 or whatever the heck it was. But what's wrong with you?
And to be fair, the three of us did. No, well, not you, Brian, because you didn't bother showing up. Good job, co-host. But the three of us did accurately predict a very extensive catch-up scene last week, so I'd say we did a pretty good job with the predictions.
Oh, man, Shevitz. Okay, how do I say that? Because it's Passover. So, getting back to the marriage, couple little fun little tidbits about this that kind of struck my fancy. First of all, the number one confirmation of something we had heard said on a Breaking Bad episode, but we never knew is that true or is he just being Saul here? No, it's actually true. Jimmy's been married twice before. That's pretty kind of significant. And I love that we're never going to talk about that ever again on the show, apparently. But wait, he's been married twice before? Seriously? That was true? Yes, we get that confirmed in this episode. He has been married twice before. Beyond that, we get lots of Huel. I am going to always wonder who that woman was who was the other witness. I don't know if we get a confirmation of who the heck she is. Anything else I wrote here? Oh, why were Kim's parents so cheap with the names? I thought everyone got a middle name at this point. Anyway, they get married and they go back to work. There's not even lunch or a honeymoon. So, again, much like Dan just kind of piped in there, and let's take that a little further. What are your guys' thoughts on the fact that these two got married? Was this really a good idea? Or does it protect Jimmy, or does it really put Kim potentially more in the crosshairs? And no, we're not talking about the next episode yet. I really want to keep these two separate as much as we can this week. So, who do we go? Do we go to Alpha Dog, or do we go to Jimmy? Or do we go to Dan already? They spoke. We don't need to hear him again so soon. I'm going to play the gender card and go to Jamie first, because I think she's not going to remember anything else about the episode because she was reeling from wisdom tooth drugs or something. So, what was your take on that?
I don't know. I think men never get first.
It was a bad idea. It was a bad idea. Listen to this guy. It's casual yet luxurious. No, it was a bad idea. Clearly, they're not together anymore. Things didn't work out, right? We know that it was a bad idea.
So that's one vote for bad idea.
Well, they could still be together.
Could be. So, good idea, bad idea.
She could have got poisoned by ricin or something.
Mm.
and they died, and they still liked each other.
Hey,
Isn't that a nice thought?
remember what I said? Remember what I said about the harebrained schemes? And I'm just kidding. I kid, because I'm a kid. And Brian. So, what were your thoughts on it?
Bad idea. I think that we've seen the last few episodes. Kim has this thing where she won't give up. She won't be defeated, like where she marches in and turns around the JMM stuff or the Mesa Verde stuff. She seems to not want to quit, to want to see things through. And I think at the last minute, she turns around and says, "Let's get married" to Jimmy in the prior episode. I think she thinks she can sort of compromise and save it and also protect him in a way they can communicate openly. Mm-hmm. But let's be honest, bad idea.
Right. Well, one of the qualities that she and Jimmy certainly share, they both got a definite stubborn streak in them.
Yes.
And there's no kind of squashing that quality about them as far as, I mean, sometimes Jimmy appears as though he's going to compromise or accede to something, but usually he doesn't. He usually kind of, he might mean it in the moment, but then something the impulse control that he lacks pushes him to, which we spoke about in a previous podcast. You might have heard it, Brian. I'm just kidding. Why did I do that? No, sorry. You've been super busy and sick, and here I am being, well, whatever. It's funny. Anyway, but yeah. I mean, I'll just say my first thought once I saw this wedding come to fruition, I had two thoughts actually. Number one, they say they're just doing this for the legal reasons and arrangements, but I love that the actors both have little moments when you realize, when we already knew this, but no, this is more than just a legal arrangement. There is more to it than that. And it's actually the subtleties of both their performances, which, as we've seen throughout this season and previous seasons, that give us those little cues, those little hints, which are really kind of nice. But the flip of it is, once I realized what they were doing, I was like going, "Oh no! This does not, for me." I got the little hole in my stomach. This does not bode well for Kim being in this position. If he's gonna start saying stuff and confiding in her, which we see explored in the following episode. Again, we'll get there when we get there, but it makes me worry. I still refuse to believe they'll do that, because I think they love the character so much and they keep talking about her in every article and interview. But then again, that might be the perfect way to kill somebody off, and it'll just be horrible. So I am legitimately worried about Kim at this point. So, after that, in the episode, Jimmy, after he gets a call from Nacho, he meets his new client, quote unquote, Jorge de Guzman, which is, of course, is Lalo. We also find out that Lalo expects to be gotten out on bail, and if Jimmy can pull it off, he can be a friend of the cartel. And we also get one of the nice little witty moments in the episode with Lalo when he inquires about the initials JMM on Jimmy's briefcase, and where Jimmy says that slogan that he actually never uses, justice matters most, and Lalo says, no, it's just make money, which definitely sounds like, well, in about 3 or 4 years, if he has that briefcase, it certainly means just make money, that's for damn sure. Meanwhile, during all this, and I'll try to do this more quickly than I've been doing, that's when Kim has the aforementioned meeting with Mesa Verde, the one where she first profusely is apologizing, then she turns back on her heel and essentially puts the onus on Kevin for never heeding her advice time and time again during the whole Tucumcari, however you pronounce it, debacle. That seems to do the trick. And then later that night, Jimmy does keep his word by confessing to Kim something he doesn't want to tell her, which is essentially the Lalo situation. And it's also the closest we've ever had, and perhaps we'll ever get, to a sex scene on this series, because people apparently are not, writing in wanting to see Mike in a sex scene, I guess. I don't know. So I want to throw it to you guys because I'm doing more of a recap thing than I really intend to do here. But I will say the only comment I want to make about it is Kim leaving and then coming back is something we've seen before in the series with Jimmy a number of times. So it's kind of funny to see Kim doing that. Where Jimmy something happens in a meeting, whatever it is, an interview, he leaves, then he turns on and comes back and ends up crushing it or getting it or throwing it away, depending what the situation is, if we recall previous seasons. So I like it. It feels like at this point that's almost a trope on this series because I think it's happened at least 3, probably more than that number of times on this show. So, Jamie, you are still devoid of memory, so I'm good.
Guilty.
I'll leave it to one of the gentlemen to chime in next. So whoever speaks up first can talk about what I was talking about here. Oop, bad echo.
I knew Dan would wait just to make it uncomfortable.
Well,
I knew he would do that on purpose.
It's kind of one of the hallmarks of our podcast.
Yeah. The pregnant pause with Dan.
The funny thing is, once upon a time, back in the olden times, I used to send Dan like an email with like 10, 15, 20 cuts to make of all like 2 seconds here, 3 seconds there, because there was like all these horrific elongated pauses, which shouldn't be there. And then I kind of like gave up on it. It's like, because I know, I understood, obviously it's a mind-numbing, crazy amount of work for him to do. And I understand how I get how he does it. It's like, that's not fun. It's not fun. So I just figured, okay, either people just stop fucking doing that, or we'll just make fun of it every time it happens, which is what you just did. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think what I was hitting on, and you followed up in the sort of thought I have is Jimmy turns around and comes back to get to finish the score. Like he wants to win and get cash up his ego. Kim turns around and goes back to try to fix things. Like you think about her coming back to the guy in the house. You know, she's not winning by going back to that guy. She's just trying to make it better. She feels bad about it. Mm-hmm. She really didn't want to leave after Kevin made her eat shit because she knew he was wrong. And while she was somewhat complicit, Kevin didn't listen to her. I think they both do the same thing and are stubborn, but she comes at it from a sense of morality that Jimmy has slowly twisted.
Right.
Jimmy comes at it from the sense of like, hey, am I going to regret letting this score or this chance pass me by? And so I think the flip side of them and their approach to that was very interesting. And seeing Kim kick ass against Kevin was great because I've had enough of Kevin.
I like seeing Schweiger kind of back her play there too. That was kind of sweet, you know.
Yeah,
because they've had an interesting up and down relationship lately. So it was kind of nice to see him trust her judgment, even though that maybe her judgment has been okay. It has been impaired lately.
Oh yeah, that's one. I mean, if you're going to get the respect of your boss, I mean, that's one way. That's one amazing way to do it because she was able to pull off that whole moment while still remaining fairly professional about it. Kind of close. She was close, close to being unprofessional. But and it's funny, as Brian, like you were saying, it's funny how she's complicit in all the bullshit and the chicanery that was going on. And I just keep loving saying the word chicanery when we talk about the show. Thank you, Chuck. But she's also right the whole time. So it's kind of fun in that sense. The other thing, yeah, and then when Jimmy later is telling her about the stuff with Lalo, that was a tough scene for me because on one hand I was like, oh, Jimmy's doing the right thing. He's keeping his word, which is weird, but this is bad. I got again. It started to heighten up the tension or my concern for her character. But I have to say I do like the fact that we're finally slowly bringing the storylines together instead of them operating on separate tracks for so much of the series. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon that we see happening in these last couple episodes. So I guess we can move on to the next chunk, which was kind of fun. We got the Madrigal meeting. I kind of wanted to hear Dan talk about this, of all people. The Madrigal meeting where we had the various chain restaurant CEOs all talking about, like, you know, the different things they have planned. And I was like trying to check out the names of all the different places because I knew they were going to like make up a bunch of places, you know, try to see what it was they specialized in. The fact that, you know, I got to give it to Esposito. I mean, no one, except for I guess maybe Mike, but even more so, no one keeps a straight face as well as he does. And the fact that he had to introduce their new item is spice curls.
I didn't even know that was the name. I just thought they sounded like really delicious. I would like that. I like those flavors.
I just love that they were called spice curls, and we got to see someone we haven't. I think we haven't seen since season 5 of Breaking Bad. At the head of the table had Peter Schuler, who folks might remember had died in a most inventive suicide back in season 5 of Breaking Bad. It's probably the thing people remember, probably the only thing people actually remember about that guy, quite frankly. One of the really interesting things about this entire sequence here, later on in a hotel room, we get this little bit of insight about Gus. When he's talking to Schuler and he says, "Do you remember Santiago? Our backs were up to the wall, against the wall. I'll never forget what you did for me." Again, I think I said it in either the last podcast or a couple podcasts ago. I still think that we need to get a major Gus flashback episode on this series. I just feel they got enough room to do it. Gus is the one character I think I'm not saying they have to tell us everything about him backstory-wise, like that we don't already know. But I think we need to do a little bit more with him. And you drop some ideas like that there, you make me that much more curious. I'm really thinking that we'll get one. Personally.
Yeah, and it's the second really obvious Santiago reference. So I think, you know, if they don't do that, I'd be surprised at this point. Of course, I don't think there's time to do it in the season yet, which, you know, one wouldn't think they'd be name dropping it so much this early and wait till, you know, 2022 or whenever the show comes back. But I guess it's a smart enough audience with the show where they'll remember.
I think they will wait, Dan. I mean, I think that we'll see Gus being fully the Gus we meet in Breaking Bad right towards the end of this series.
Yes. I'm with Brian. I'm always with Brian. Whatever Brian says, he's right.
Wow.
I don't know, he already kind of seems like that Gus to me.
But can I ask one question?
Nope.
Shouldn't when you heard spice curls, didn't you want to hear him say "spice up your life"?
No.
I was thinking about the flavor and how well that would go with ketchup, Brian. That's what I was thinking.
Well, yes, they're essentially French fries. Of course they would go well with ketchup. Wow. All right. So then we get back to Nacho. Wow. We go from Spice Ghost to Nacho. I'm getting hungry here. So basically, Nacho has a little meeting with Mike, and he refers to Lalo as still levying orders from prison, and the orders are to burn down one of Gus's Los Pollos Hermanos restaurants. And then we get to that scene where Nacho and Gus himself, being the hands-on guy that he is, are preparing to and actually burn down Los Pollos Hermanos. Gus sets up that incredibly beautifully elaborate sliding chicken timer to blow the place up in a huge fireball. One question, then we can talk about this a little bit if you want. I mean, I don't know if Dan had tears in his eyes during the scene or not.
It wasn't the bodily fluid created by me seeing chicken restaurant be destroyed. I'm not going to lie.
All right. Are we at... I was going to wait till it was after. We're 20 to 12. I was going to wait for that sort of. That's going to be the after dark kind of. Not talking about emissions or secretions just yet. Wow, I thought it was a podcast. Then it turned into chatterbait. I don't know what happened. So, question, and then we can talk about a few of these things here. Was that the main Los Pollos Hermanos restaurant that we've seen a number of times, or that just because it seemed like it could be anyone when they were talking about the plan to begin with? But was it the one that where Gus usually operates out of?
No, it's a different one. It's like a smaller one off in a different location. I don't remember where they said it was. I think they mentioned it in the next episode, but I think they said Las Lunas or something.
Okay.
And the main episode kind of like northern Albuquerque, or the main restaurant. Las Lunas is like south of town a little ways.
I got a feeling if I did a freeze frame on that newspaper in the next episode, they might be able to figure out where it was. Okay, so it's not the one where Gus operates out of himself all the time. Okay, I didn't think it was. I just because I kept thinking about poor Lyle. I just wanted to make sure. The other one other little notable thing that happened during all this, and we can talk a little bit more if you want, was the scene with Mike and when he's reading The Little Prince to his granddaughter, and he has a subsequent conversation with his daughter-in-law, whatever. It kind of plays into answering the questions we've had as to why Mike decided to work for Gus. And if there was one character I could accept giving us just kind of a clipped one nice little quote and that covers it, because he's, unless, there are situations where Mike will give us a story, as we get in the next episode, or half measures, but sometimes Mike doesn't have to say too much. And when he says, I decided to play the cards I was dealt, that's what he's talking about. And I kept thinking, I like that. I almost wish I could have gotten that instead of spending a half an hour of him, building a window frame or whatever. But, I kind of, it made me accept him working for Gus a little bit better than I have for the last couple episodes.
Was he reading one of the books that he got for 5 cents at the library a couple episodes ago?
Yes, it was one of those books.
Tight.
Yes,
I like that.
You see, if we were halfway professional, you'd have the sound. But you'll probably put one in now just to make me look like an idiot. You need the Tuco saying tight kind of sound bite or something, shit like that.
I don't know how I could make you look like an idiot when I said tight. I like that when talking about children's books. I think you're probably going to end up being the winner here, and me just looking like CJ or something.
Wow. All right, so let's see. We've had a cream your jeans kind of joke, and now we're kind of right to pedophilia. All right, excellent. We're going to get reported to the podcast is going to get reported to the FBI.
I was going to say, what's less than 0-star review is being reported to the FBI.
Well, maybe I'm hoping the feds will at least give us 3 stars.
Hey, Brian's my lawyer, so this conversation is a privilege, correct?
No, it's not.
Damn it!
No, I will say it's enjoyable during this time to talk about this show and with you all to enjoy it, and the Mike stuff. The 2 episodes we're talking about, Mike sort of had lost his way, and it was good seeing Mike be Mike these last 2 episodes, and I've really enjoyed that. I missed him having a purpose.
Yes.
And seeing him with a purpose. Mike's the kind of guy, once he commits to something, he goes all in. And you see, once he decides to do this, he's becoming the Mike that we all fell in love with. warts and all, and I thought that was really great seeing it these 2 episodes to see him be badass Mike again.
I agree.
Yep.
Well, we're just gonna keep we're gonna keep using the soundbite of you saying you just agree with everything with Brian now. So
you guys are wrong. Brian's always right.
All right, so basically, Jamie doesn't have to be on the podcast anymore. We're just gonna have a little soundbite of her from now on.
Yep.
Whatever Brian said.
I have Jamie's proxy.
Yep, exactly. He speaks for me. Speaks for the trees. He's my Lorax.
Oh, good Lord. So after that, so we get back to the whole situation of Jimmy trying to get bail for Lalo, especially when he finds out that Mike is part of this whole thing. So now we start seeing the more of the overlapping of storylines here. And that's where the whole thing about Mike, or should we call him Dave Clark, the investigator, which apparently I guess he used that pseudonym once in Breaking Bad as well. From I read that somewhere, which I had to like strain my brain to remember that. I was like, Dave Clark, and be like, Dave Clark 5? Awesome. No, we're not playing Dave Clark at the end of this podcast, Dan. Although I wouldn't mind. Anyway, the whole thing is that the investigator, no, there's something better to play. Shut. So he tainted the case basically by his clear and obvious manipulation of that state's main and only witness. So that's how Jimmy is able to get Lalo out on bail, which turns out to be $7 million. I just got a text in my ear. So during this whole sequence, we can really see the emotion that Jimmy is going through, how him reacting to seeing the victim's family in court, and as well as seeing them in the court in the Carter later on. It's kind of interesting, however. There's something that these two moments have in common, I noticed. When he's in court, it's almost like he looks over at the family, the grieving family, clearly, and he kind of goes somewhere, and he like all the sounds around them kind of become swirling or drowned out, whatever. And then when he finally snaps out of it, one can say he kind of goes into Saul Goodman mode. And when we see it happen in the hallway later on, again, he's looking around the corner and he sees it, and he's obviously feeling a certain amount of guilt over what he just did and everything. And that's when Howard approaches him, and I know folks are probably going to want to talk about this scene. He again snaps out of it, and the way that escalates and him going off on Howard also had a little bit of a kind of a Saul kind of flavor to it as well. So it's interesting that we see it happen like 2 different times within a few minutes of each other. So I'm sure we want to talk about it. I actually wrote down a bunch of the things he said to Howard when he was ripping into him, because I enjoyed his diatribe. Things like, "You're a teensy tiny man in a teensy weensy little bubble. I travel in worlds you can't even imagine. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I'm so far beyond you. I'm like a god in human clothing." I like that. God in human clothing. "Lightning bolts shoot from my finger." This whole thing was like, it's kind of similar to when Jimmy was doing his whole spiel about network way back in season 1, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the first times we see Jimmy encounter Howard in the show, if I'm not mistaken, when he goes to meet him in the conference room. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, I'm going to throw it to you, especially because I know Howard is one of your favorite characters. So all this stuff, what did you think of all this stuff? What were your thoughts on it?
I was impressed with how Howard handled the situation. I mean, he wasn't, he's definitely not quite as much of a hothead as Jimmy is at this point, which is good to see, because Howard was kind of having some tough issues last season. So, but I mean, I just thought it was nice that they showed like Howard is like smart enough to realize that Jimmy was the one fucking with him, instead of just like having him be oblivious. It's like it does not do a disservice to the character. by showing him like being perceptive enough to figure it out.
Right. Oh, I think. Oh, go on.
And he held his own pretty well in the conversation. He just let Jimmy freaking go off and just he didn't engage the lunacy. And I thought it was a good Howard scene, as well as with some good fun Odenkirk going fucking to town.
Yeah, I would agree. Yes, Jamie?
No, it just is remarkable to me watching him always. It's like when it comes to Howard, it doesn't matter what he does. It's like he's always going to see him in a negative light, and like the hatred that he has for him is so strange, because it's, as a viewer, you can tell that the hatred he has for Howard, I mean, some of it is Howard, but so much of it is outside sourced. It's misdirected. But where's Chuck? You can't sit here and say those things to him. And Howard's just, he's just getting through life, and he was like going through hell about everything that happened with Chuck, and then he's starting to feel better. And I think that really pissed Jimmy off,
yes.
Just to see him get better and not be beating himself up for something. It pissed him because he pulled that string again, with killing his brother.
Right.
I think it's the most, as funny as some of the things are that he will do with Howard. I think it's when we see him in his most unflattering light, is how he treats Howard.
Yeah, he's definitely had a few moments of that nature. Mostly, I mean, obviously post Chuck's death,
right?
Especially when he basically lets him like marinate in the blame. I guess to a certain extent, going with what you're both saying, I on one hand, I think he's always looked at Howard, and more so that he's kind of a surrogate for Chuck in terms of this was the person who was the obstacle, who thought little of you for all these years. But in a weird way, it's almost like Howard should have some responsibility for the origin of Jimmy / Saul at this point, because it's his whole manner of being and how he practices is almost a direct, not just a contrast, but it's almost like a rejection of the button-down corporate, bullshit that Howard is. He just does he does a totally different kind of bullshit, but he's more the working man's bullshit, so to speak, I guess. Actually, we have a lawyer here. We should get his take on it, Brian.
Well, I think that Jimmy rejects what Howard stands for, but the bigger thing for me is I think we see in this scene what Saul is to Jimmy. Saul is where Jimmy goes when he's hurting, and that's where he feels strong, which really worries me that his final transformation into Saul will be to avoid dealing with something very painful. Because when Howard says to Jimmy, when he starts going off on him, he says, clearly I see, you're still in pain and haven't worked through it. And then Jimmy really loses his shit and becomes Saul. When he sees the family in court, he's hurting, and then he becomes Saul when the lights are on. I think the transformation of him is to avoid being vulnerable, to avoid dealing with the vulnerability of hurt, pain. Saul is a safe place. Saul doesn't give a shit. Saul just wants the money. That's Jimmy's escape. And I think we see that very clearly in these two scenes, and we see how effective he is in the Saul character. What we do see in this still is there's still a glimmer of Jimmy. Jimmy's not gone, but Saul handles the problems because Jimmy's hurting.
Right.
Saul's like pure id.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. I think also to a certain extent, the way perhaps Jimmy himself views his Saul persona, Saul represents him being bold, being courageous. And
yes.
And so when he steps up to do these things, it is with that Saul Goodman-esque flair that we've seen now for the last season or two, and that we'll certainly see as the series progresses, or when Breaking Bad is Breaking Bad, from stuff we see in this episode as well as the next one as well. And it's kind of, in a way, it's the unfortunate thing about that is that we're watching as he more and more will tend to embrace that side, and we know that to embrace that, you're only going to lose that much more of your moral compass. And, you're only going to go to that much more of a darker place where it does end up just becoming about, the money and stuff like that, and not really caring about. He's always been one who the consequences screw over other people, but it's going to get to a point where he's going to seem to care less and less about that, I think, which was more a Saul Goodman trait, at least for the first couple of seasons of Breaking Bad that he was on. Kind of changed a little later on in that show, but people pretend to forget that. I don't know.
Well, and if you've noticed, his wardrobe is another telling sign of how much Saul is coming out to play and basically starting to take over.
Mm-hmm.
You would see him in the past, like when he did his commercial bit, stuff like that. Anything that you would kind of associate with the personality that he has around Saul, he'd wear really bright clothes and the wide ties with the heavy prints. But it was, it was spotty. It was just here and there. Because you would see him in more his conservative suits and stuff when he was in the courts. But you're starting to see those ties and those flashy colors a lot more this season than we have in the seasons in the past.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the bigger his ego gets, the wider his ties get.
We're not going for something phallic here, are we? Anyway. That's Dan's department. Anyway, was there... Did any of you have anything else you wanted to say about that episode before we move to the next one? Give you guys a moment to think. All right, that awkward pause is brought to you by... Anyway.
Brought to you by Heinz.
I was just really waiting to see how long we could carry it.
By audiobooks that no one will ever buy. Anyway.
Well, I will say this. It is interesting this season, and this can sort of bridge the first episode to the second because it carries over.
Just like a good co-host would. Go ahead.
It is interesting to see how great Tony Dalton has been as Lalo. And how in the courtroom, in the scenes, $7 million, cool. We'll get that he's almost become he's surpassed Nacho in terms of importance in the show this season, and probably in terms of his performance has been the revelation of the last year or so of this show, because any scene he's in is just crazy good, and the way he's played Lalo to be more intelligent than you would expect him to be and more understated than you would expect him to be has been great.
Yeah, because he really seems like somebody that would blow his top and lose his temper and be, real basic writing. That's kind of how you could write that character, but he's a smooth cat for sure.
Yeah, he's not Hector. He's got a bit more going on than that.
Right.
Absolutely. The episode we're about to talk about, he got some great moments in that as well. I love his performance at this point because it's just a nice, different dynamic that we haven't had on the show, for, at least as far to my recollection, as far as their antagonists have been concerned. There's still an insidious threat about him, but it's different. It's different than Tuco. It's different than Hector. It's different than the cousins. It's different than Gus or the people that work for him. And he does have a little bit, and he's a bit more fun than we're normally accustomed to. He doesn't chew up the scenery because, like you're saying, he will be a little bit understated at times, but he definitely gets off of his somewhat witty lines here and there. And
yeah,
he's a lot of, he's fun, which is kind of different.
The mustache.
Oh, the mustache is great.
Yeah, that's what it is.
There's,
where all of his power is.
There's always just a hint of menace to what he does. That's just perfect. That he's joking and play, but just beneath the surface, like he's not playing.
Right. All right. So, with that, let's switch gears, and we can start talking about this week's episode, which was the 8th episode of the season, Bagman, not Batman. It's written by Gordon Smith, who I've talked about several times on our podcast, so I'm not going to go into all his stuff again. Guy who wrote 5-0 and a bunch of other stuff. And it was directed by none other than Vince Gilligan. Now, there's a little funny story about Gilligan directing this episode. I want to start off with. As I think some folks who pay more attention, maybe they read the occasional article or hear the occasional interview, might know the directors for shows like Better Call Saul, including, apparently, generally speaking, Vince himself, they don't usually specifically pick the episodes they're going to direct. Obviously Gilligan has a bit more of a say because who he is, and when you go look at what he's done in before, yeah, he directed the very first episode of the series, or the finale for season 2, or the first 2 episodes of season 3, or the final or the penultimate episode of season 4. But how he got this one, I actually transcribed a little bit of an interview from that I thought was kind of funny from the Hollywood Reporter, so I wanted to share that here. So this is Vince Gilligan speaking. I lay all that at the feet of Peter Gould. He's devious. He's sadistic. He knew that I could direct an episode, and I told Melissa Bernstein the dates I was able to do one, which were dates based on me finishing up post-production on El Camino. Basically, I would see him for months leading up to them giving me the script for the episode, and he said, "Okay, you're going to do episode number 8. And I said, "Great. What can you tell me about it?" He says, "Oh, it's going to be big. It's going to be big." And then I would work out of the same office that they use on Better Call Saul when I was working on the movie. So I would run into these guys a lot. And every time I would walk by the writer's room, I would say, "Hey, how's my episode?" And he'd get this devilish grin on his face, and he'd say, "Oh, it's getting bigger every day." So I laughed the first few times he said it, and then I started to get nervous. I would look at Gordon Smith, who wrote the episode, and I would say, "Is he just messing with me?" And Gordon would just sit there with his arms crossed, as usual, just stoic, and then just shake his head slowly and emphatically. And then they finally started saying, "Well, it's Mike and Jimmy. It's a two-hander with these two guys." And I said, "That's fantastic." And they said, "Yeah, but it's big. It's like the Heartbreak Ridge of episodes. If it doesn't kill you, it's going to break your heart." And then when I finally read it, I said, "Oh my God, they are actually trying to kill me here." So that is how I came to it. So, I just love the idea that this isn't just some director. This is the co-creator or the creator, however you want to phrase it. I'd say the creator of the series, the creator of these characters. And he doesn't know until at such a late juncture what the true nature of the episode he's going to end up directing is. And then it turns out to be this one. I just think that's kind of amazing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of amazing.
No, I think it's amazing, but I don't know if they knew when they slated it, but I think we can all agree that this episode was the most Breaking Bad thing we've seen.
Yes.
This show did.
Oh, yeah.
This was, I think we were talking beforehand, this was the 4 days out. It's Breaking Bad as hell. It's set in that desert. The cartel violence, and Gilligan was a great choice to do it, and his shot composition, it was just, this episode was amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's my favorite. It's maybe even more than just this season. It might be one of my favorite of the series thus far.
Yeah, this week and last week is really kind of like, I've always had this general feeling just like, maybe I kind of like Better Call Saul, maybe I just as much as Breaking Bad, if not more. But the last couple of weeks has made it just like, I'm not quite so sure exactly, but just like I mean, they're really good at doing this stuff, and the last 2 weeks have just been awesome, awesome in every way. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the show will ever push me to the point where I'll put it past Breaking Bad because it's just not telling that majestic or amazing a story to me as what Breaking Bad pulls off. But putting that aside, it's right there with it in terms of, you know, what they're putting together episode after episode, and what they've been able to pull off is with with taking, you know, basically side characters from one series and placing the focus on them while bringing in these other new characters, and the fact that we kind of know where everything's going and we're still transfixed by it week after week. In a way, in that sense, they almost have a harder job than they had with Breaking Bad. As Brian said, and of course, dead on. This I agree. Not only is this as close as we've gotten to a Breaking Bad style episode of the show, it is very much in the same vein, spirit, and feel as the classic 4 Days Out episode that was from season 2 of Breaking Bad. I want to assume that people who were listening remember what that episode was about. That was the one where Walt and Jesse get stuck in the RV out in the desert when the engine conks out. There is something. I actually went back and watched a little bit of that episode earlier today because I knew it was going to come up a little bit in conversation, especially in comparison to this episode. It's kind of notable to realize that that's also the first episode to follow Better Call Saul episode. So it's only the second time we ever meet Saul Goodman, and we see him at the very beginning, towards the beginning of that episode. And that's when he's talking to Walt about the rather seemingly minuscule nest egg Walt has built up from the drugs at that point. And after figuring out how much it'll be after the money gets laundered and Saul takes his cut, he actually says that it'll probably leave you enough for a secondhand Subaru. I think that's a kind of important thing to point out here. Because someone said, hey, remember when our second episode, Saul said something about a secondhand Subaru? That's kind of a good idea for a car for Saul, and we know that car plays an kind of important part in this episode. And the fact that it's a Subaru Esteem, which is probably the greatest name for a car that a character could ever have. Period.
I think Saul's car is a Suzuki, actually.
Is it a Suzuki? Did I fuck that up already?
I thought it was the Subaru.
No. I think. You know what? I think that is right. It's just so it means people won't be able to give us a bad rating because I fucked that up. But I'm gonna look that up right now. Did I really?
If they haven't given us a bad rating off of body secretions and pedophilia jokes, this isn't gonna phase them. It's fine.
They haven't given us a bad rating yet. They aren't listening.
Yeah,
you're good. You're fine.
My bad.
The model of the car is not a deal breaker.
It's a Suzuki. I'm sorry. Why was it? All right. So
great. Now we're getting sued by Subaru.
Great. Now my
getting sued by Subaru. Got the FBI. I mean, this is what we do.
I'm so bummed. As building up to that point, and I was totally wrong about it. And I feel bad.
No, you're still basically right because Subaru's, their flagship car is the Outback, which is an area in Australia, primarily a desert country. In this episode, it's a journey across the desert. So I think you.
It's a walkabout.
I hate you.
Fine.
Yeah.
I hate you all. But speaking of cars and openings, did anyone else was I the only one who thought when we saw that opening shot that we were going to get the origin of the Saul Goodman car? Because we see this Cadillac that is obviously was part of some big, drug cartel massacre because there's bloody seats, they're cleaning, whatever. But when the first thing we see is that big Cadillac hood ornament, I was going, okay, that's an origin I wasn't expecting to get anytime soon. The origin of the lawyer up car. Now they didn't go back to that, but I keep thinking there's no way you place that there and that's not going to come back unless they're just having a little fun with us. Either way, I just thought it was kind of funny that they started off that way. We got that opening, which that was also showing the Salamanca cousins dipping into their clearly vast reserves of cash to fill 2 duffel bags with $7 million in cash.
Am I the only one that secretly hopes that those cousins, like, that their real speaking voice, like, every time I see them, I just want them to talk and I want them to sound like Mickey Mouse. Every time. The need for this to happen has never gone away in all of these years.
Well, that's why we're doing this podcast. My audio makes me I could do ADR for them with my, childish fucking voice.
Oh my god. All right, so where was I?
You can continue.
No. Don't apologize. That this stuff is better than what I'm doing anyway. So
yes, Scott. We all wish we would see the car.
Yeah. So then, right after we come back to seeing what we were just talking about, I think it's becoming one of the more entertaining client-attorney combos we've seen on TV in some time. As Jimmy meeting with Lalo, and Lalo does some very Jimmy-esque smooth reverse psychology on the initially reluctant Jimmy, leading Jimmy to agree to take 1,001 directions to somewhere near the border to pick up the $7 million. He's going to do it for $100K. Now, look, here's kind of how I want to break up the conversation about this episode, even though I think we're just probably going to go scatter it anyway. First half here, I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say. Just the Jimmy and Lalo stuff, especially, and then that, along with Jimmy revealing what he's up to Kim and her reaction to it. And let's just take care of everything at once. The Kim going to meet Lalo scene. Because I'd like to just take care of all those bits of housekeeping first before we get into Jimmy's misadventures and his desert odyssey with Mike. So, who'd like to go? See, Jamie, you didn't remember anything about last week. Would you like to talk first about this week's episode?
I was half dosed at this point, so I remember more. First of all, can we just let's not roll past the when he's talking about the well and he.
Uh-oh.
No, we can't roll past that.
Oh, no.
I think we've lost Jamie.
Did we just lose Jamie? But I still see her face in the chat. So
I think we need Lassie to rescue Jamie. She fell into a well. Oh, I had to drop in some fucking dog noises.
Oh my god. Wow. This is very live coming through. That clip from the honeymooners.
No, we can't go
Oh no.
You know what? Dan is an improv genius. I will give you that, Scott.
Yeah, that was amazing.
that was amazing.
All right, I'll tell you what. Brian, why don't you pick up the mantle, and then we'll see if, while you're talking, we can figure out what happened. If we can get Jamie back on, I'm a little confused about what's happened here. So
okay. As far as Jimmy and Lalo, love those scenes. Again, as we talked about earlier, the walk out the door, stop yourself, and turn around. We see Jimmy do it. Jimmy is at the deciding moment, do I go in or not? And he does. And, another big moment where he decides to do it. And he asks for the cash, makes a grab. And I wonder if you guys think $100,000, if he could have got more, or if that was probably as much as he could have gotten.
I think he could have gotten at least double that.
That's sort of what I thought. I think he probably still is too cheap. And I think the big point where Lalo got Jimmy was him saying nobody would notice you, like you're nobody. And, the one thing Jimmy doesn't want to be is nobody. So that was fantastic. As far as the moving into the Kim Lalo stuff, I was just sick that whole time. Like watching it, I was like, "What are you doing, Kim? Don't do this." And the way he reacted to her and the way he left, the thing about him that's different than her and Jimmy is, you notice when he left, he didn't stop. He just left. Like, they contrasted what Jimmy did and what everyone else does. When he went to the door and banged on the door, he didn't play. He just left. Like, he was dead serious.
Hey.
And hey, Jamie, welcome back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened. I said words and then I was gone.
Brian, why don't you finish up your thought? Then we can bounce over to Jamie.
Like nothing important. You can go. I was cracking a joke. It was probably really bad, and the universe cut me off before I could get there. So it's fine.
No, I was just talking about Kim and Lalo, and I thought that it ended better than I thought it was going to end. But now Lalo possesses information, and he knows what to do with information. And I just had the sick feeling watching it that was the genesis of the Kim ending that I don't want to happen. And I was just sick watching it. My stomach turned.
Really uncomfortable watching Lalo take the upper hand while in jail in this situation, and just realize that he had something there, and the light that he was flashing over his face as he realized what he was getting there. So I guess it doesn't.
Do you think at the end when he walked up to the door, because he clearly started calling the shots in that little meeting, do you think Kim recognized it too?
Sort of.
Yeah.
I think she mostly knew it, but I don't think she knows the depth of how intelligent and dangerous he is.
It was a real power move there when he just did that. I'm looking forward to getting out of jail and having some scene.
Let me offer a bit of my perspective as a lawyer with someone in jail. I tell people this, and I've even trained lawyers on this. There's only one thing a person in jail can do in most circumstances, and that is to say no, or to they have no control, right? You can't control where you sleep. You can't control when you eat. You have no control. But the one thing you can control is you can say no. I don't want to have that visit. No, I don't want to talk to this person. The ultimate expression of power is to say no. And so when he ends the meeting, that's his ultimate power play to say, no, I'm done. Because he can't control anything else. He's gotten his information. He's got what he's wanted. So he's done. No, I'm done. Bye. Peace out. And that was a power move. And he left because he now knows enough to use. And that's what's scary.
Right. Well, he gets a valuable little bit of insight because obviously he's wondering where his man is with his money, and when this woman shows up, it almost helps Jimmy's eventual story of which he's going to have to be very careful about. I'm very curious how they're going to handle it in the next episode, because he can't very well tell him that some guy working for Gus Fring was the one to blow away these other cartel members who were trying to steal the money from whatever. So I'm intrigued to see how they handle that aspect of it. But again, you were talking before about how clearly what a calculating and intelligent person Lalo is. I love the fact that he kind of figures out Kim's feelings and everything about her husband pretty quickly. And, he sees it, just as I was saying before, this isn't just a simple legal arrangement, whatever. She really is scared for him and loves the guy. So I really kind of like that. What you were saying about the actor and the character, I think his scenes in this episode, what he does with Jimmy earlier on while he's reading the newspaper, which is just done to great comic effect, and then how scary the scene is with Kim, because you're watching it when she first does it and you're going, no, this is such a bad idea. You know how your idea about getting married was a bad idea? This is 10 times worse. 10 times worse. What are you thinking? You know? But she has not really, how do I put this? She hasn't really dealt with these kind of people before. You know, not her stuff when she's doing her pro bono work. She's not dealing with these, you know, these cartel murderer types. Whereas Jimmy's gotten at least a little bit of a taste of it. You know, he still hasn't gotten used to it quite yet, but he's getting there. But because you think she should know better. But yeah. However, I will say this: the fact that they're having a scene like that and they're playing it out like that makes me think they definitely won't get rid of her character that way. Only because it's just too obvious. It's too heavy-handed foreshadowing. Like, oh, this is how we're going to get rid of her.
If they did, I can't imagine that. You know, I mean, Jimmy's not like a complete sociopath. I can't imagine he would like ever be able to just like have gotten like somebody he actually cares about like murdered by his foolishness and then continue to be like the exact same kind of lawyer in the future.
Right.
So I can't imagine she's going to end up getting whacked by the cousins or something. I don't fucking know.
Right.
Well, the corollary thought I had to that, Dan, was, wouldn't it be almost worse if she was the real power lawyer behind the cartel and Jimmy was just the face? And because he was the one that hooked her up with him accidentally, that's why he's guilty and feels so bad about it, that now Kim is the lawyer for the cartel and can't get out.
And it'd be really interesting if like she was representing like, you know, Mesa Verde and the cartel at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm busy just trying to work out a segment just where we talk about the word corollary. So you and your fucking 25-cent words over there, freaking lawyers. Can't talk like a real guy. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say before, I'm pulling a total Dan here. When we were talking about the whole Saul Goodman thing, and as far as it being something that Jimmy kind of resorts to. Actually, you know what? It'll come up into what we're going to talk about. I'll let it come more. I'll pretend I didn't say anything, and I'll act like it came up organically in the coming up conversation. It just occurred to me now. So I guess let's move on to the rest of the episode after that weird whatever I just did. I just realized the whiskey must have just kicked in, I guess. So let's resume. Wow. I didn't think I'd put that much in this glass, apparently, but it's a very wide-mouthed glass. So let's resume following Jimmy. And, you know, the episode it's a fairly straightforward episode. You know, he waits for the cousins to appear with the money. You know, yo soy abogado. And then, you know, obviously Jimmy thinks he'll be smooth sailing back to Albuquerque with the $7 million in his trunk. And then a whole lot of bad shit happens, which leads to Mike joining the journey back to New Mexico. I will let you guys enjoy talking about this from this point on. Dan, especially since we were, as Brian already referenced at the very top of the episode conversation, I'm watching this episode. I'm thinking of you and your adoration for not just, you know, the desert, but also photography, because that's kind of one of your strong suits there. So I'm watching all this, and I'm like, oh, Dan must be loving all of this. You know, there's so many beautifully composed shots and so on. And plus, you know, you've spent some time out there. So beyond, and I mean, obviously, and if you want to talk about any of those things, please do. But I wanted to get your take on, and you can go as far, if you want to take it all the way to the end of the episode, or you just want to take it up to a certain point, because there's so much to talk about. Should be lots for everybody, actually. But what were you thinking during a lot of this? Observations?
Well, the area that Lalo sends Jimmy to is not anywhere close to Albuquerque at all. I mean, it's all the way down to the border, and it's not a it's not a good area of New Mexico or of America or anything. I mean, I've just driven through Deming, and I haven't done much south of the highway there, but I've stayed in a nearby town, Lordsburg, and it's one of the sketchier places I've stayed in the Southwest. So I wouldn't recommend the area, but I mean, it's very far from Albuquerque. I mean, it's probably 4-hour drive one way. So, it's a cool area. I mean, I like that kind of stuff, but it's not an easy short mission. You definitely, 100,000 still a good payday for that.
Okay, Susan, was that a good enough travelogue for you? Anyway, go on. Go on.
But it was. I mean, that is an actual area down there. Down where Antelope Wells is. I mean, that's an area where I guess you could cross the border if you wanted to. If on some sketchy side road, and I'm sure there probably was less border patrol back then before, the United States leadership somehow grew the very, very small male reproductive system and then lost their fucking minds. But yeah, I really dug the desert stuff. It's Lawrence of Arabia traveling-esque type stuff, but I'll let you guys talk about some of that, because I could just talk about various desert stuff for hours. I'm not going to, but just one thing, this show is just, I mean, it never really had any business ending up being as good as it can, or as good as it ended up being. Pardon my garbled English there, but one thing.
What the hell? Someone frying? Someone making French fries or something?
No, that's the sound. That's the sound of the storm whipping up where I'm at. Like the winds are really starting to go strong. And
have your sirens gone off? If your sirens go, just bolt, dude.
No, sirens haven't gone off. But
if you want to be a co-host, you're going to stay. Just like I said, pretend that Lyle is cleaning a fryer using boil out, which is against the rules for Los Pollos Hermanos.
Frying up some spice curls there.
That's right. That's right. Fry up some spice curls.
Oh boy.
Well, anyway, this is a really great show, but this episode can really highlight something where it takes a scene, Jimmy and Mike out in the desert, and of course we can talk about it in a little more linear fashion, but I just want to say that they're stuck in this survival situation, and as you would expect, somebody with some kind of the ability to be prepared for in a possible excursion in the desert, Mike's got some space blankets on him, and the fact that you don't really have to Saul, I guess at this point, doesn't have to say anything about this, but the viewer that has a clue about anything knows exactly why he doesn't want to use a space blanket.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such an impressive thing that they managed to put together there. That's not the least bit it's not the least bit manufactured. I mean, this is the kind of situation that would happen. I mean, a little space blanket doesn't take up any space in your pack. It doesn't weigh anything. It makes sense to have out in the freaking desert where it's cold as fuck during the night. And just having that on there in this situation just works on so many different levels. I mean, and that's what makes this kind of show better than, other shows that people like that suck. I just said I didn't want to insult Jamie and Brian at the same time. Those were different shows. So
okay.
Fine, I can take it.
Well, just to chime in something before I throw it to you guys again. Speaking of multiple levels or many levels, I have to say, because I've been a fan of his for over 25 years now. So, Odenkirk. You know how you got? We've talked in previous episodes of this is the episode that Ray Seahorn should submit and blah blah, all that kind of crap. This is the Odenkirk episode. He works on multiple levels throughout this episode, from the comical with the Yosai Abogado to the shell shocked situation during the whole shootout. And everything on his journey with Mike, all the way to when he finally takes that space blanket and heads out to the road in order to help Mike be able to take a shot at that guy or whatever. And finally culminating with the drink of piss. This, to me, even more so than some of his stuff as Gene and those little black and white bits that we've been getting at the beginning of every season, this to me was the most impressive work over the course of an entire episode that I've seen from Odenkirk. And that's saying a lot because I think he's done great work in any number of episodes. Like, like Chicanery, for example, and others. But this was the one I was just like, this to me, I thought he just brought it to a level that I wasn't sure he had, and he definitely did. I was very impressed with him from this episode, and thrilled to see it as well.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say, I love watching the two of them. I mean, we've got, we've had a few scenes with them together throughout the last couple of seasons and stuff, but this was so great to get this whole episode. Just the two of them bouncing off of each other a little bit. Like when Jimmy takes the bag and he's tired of carrying it, and so he wraps it around his waist, or the handle around his waist, and Mike's like, it's not going to work. and just walks off. And I mean, immediately, I'm sure you guys were in the same place, is like immediately you're like, that's going to make a hole in the bag.
Yeah.
But Mike just lets him go because he knows that he's the kind of guy that has to prove to himself it's not going to work. And then the way to solve that is with the license plate. And I don't know why I thought that was so funny, but I don't know. You use what you have, but the fact that it was the license plate that saved this hole in the bag that Jimmy created himself by not listening to somebody who actually had a sound mind and advice.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie. I think that the amazing thing in seeing what Mike and Jimmy did in this episode is, last episode Mike kind of came to terms with who he is and said, I'm going to play the cards I'm dealt. And he's sort of like Jimmy's spiritual guide through the desert, that by the end of this episode, Jimmy, I think when Jimmy drinks the piss with the defiance on his face, after also earning Mike's respect by just saying fuck it and walking down to the road to set up those guys. And when he first went down, I thought, oh man, what are you doing? You're being an idiot. And then when he goes, you better have that thing ready, it even kind of caught Mike off guard, like that Jimmy just sort of gave in to do it. And the sort of going through the desert, the camaraderie that you saw, I think by the end of this, we probably, watching Breaking Bad, wondered how these two got hooked up. And as we started this show, Mike has had disdain for Jimmy quite a bit. But I think by the end of this, Mike has a grudging respect for Jimmy. Because Jimmy,
Sure.
Jimmy just said to heck with it. I'm going to do what I need to do. You do what you need to do, and maybe we'll get out of this. And I think him taking that drink of his own piss is like, I think that's where the scales tipped. And after Mike saying, this is why I do what I do, and giving him the speech about, I've got people, but they don't know what I do, but that's why I do what I do. I think that something tipped, and this is where, at the very least, Jimmy is 49% and Saul is 51%, and the scales tipped in that favor by the end of this. I think this was a transformational journey and a transformational moment.
Jamie, follow that.
You know how the saying goes. Whatever Brian says, he's right.
Oh, it helps us keep the podcast shorter, so thank you for that. No, I'm just kidding. I would generally agree with what Brian was saying. I would say a grudging respect.
Yeah,
I wouldn't let it go too far. The interesting thing about one of the interesting thing about the episodes is, and again, it's not the first time. but I like seeing that Mike is fallible, because Mike made mistakes, and he says it himself. He didn't realize he should have brought more men with him. Then it was just him and his car, which gets shot up. So it's kind of, and you can see that he feels kind of guilty because Jimmy is going through this, being shell shocked. This is not a situation he's used to. Mike comes from a place of violence. He's seen it. He's experienced it. He was a cop, whatever. He's done things. He's seen things. Jimmy has not been exposed to this before. And you can tell though it's the first time, much like the respect thing, you can see Mike cares. He's concerned. And he kind of is taking a little bit, and he probably feels a little bit responsible for it going as far as it did, because it's just him. So I think I don't know if this is what is the ultimate bonding thing between them that we see carry forth in Breaking Bad, but it's certainly a huge building block towards that, much more so than anything we've seen before, as far as, like you were saying, the kind of almost comical disdain that Mike constantly has for him, where it's actually amazing Mike's ever done anything for him ever. You think back to when Mike was getting photos of Chuck's house for him. It's like, wow, I can't believe Mike was actually willing to do that. And he built the door for him too. Because most of the time he's like, yeah, it's not for me. I'm not going to do, I'm not going to get the Hummel figure, or the thing he asked him to do a couple weeks ago, whatever the heck it was. It's like, no. Of course he was busy, building window frames or something. But yeah, I think the key word you use, and it's the absolute correct one, is it's a transformational episode. I think we tend to spend a lot of time on this podcast since the very first season of, we're looking for all the moments and cues of, quote unquote, when he becomes Saul, whether it's something slight or subtle, or something as overt as he's actually using the name, whether it be in a commercial or or practicing law, whatever. This, I think, kind of goes a much longer way towards it than anything we've seen before. And the thing I wanted to mention before, the thing about the whole, he resorts to the Saul Goodman persona as kind of, that's in his mind being bold or courageous. Well, that's what we see when he takes the space blanket and he heads out towards the road. It's kind of like, Saul Goodman's kind of like his avatar in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he is defiant about it, and he takes that slug of piss, and there's nothing. It's funny to talk about it, but there's nothing funny about it in the moment. It's done.
Right.
It's done. And the fact that they were able, especially someone who's more of a comic actor than a dramatic actor, Odenkirk himself, was able to play us a moment where he's taking a slug of his own urine, and it plays totally straight and it works. And not to mention the fact he also walks off without Mike. Like, Mike ends up trailing behind him, which is also interesting because that's not been the case for the entire rest of the journey. I think it's a hugely important episode. Go on.
Drinking his own piss that's the moment where, like, that's him saying, I'm a survivor. I'll do whatever it takes to survive. Because the whole episode, he wouldn't drink the piss. And Mike said, look, at some point you're going to have to survive. He goes down, he grabs the space blanket, which he disdains because of the connection to Chuck. But he puts the space blanket on, goes down, does his job, hopes Mike does his job. When he drinks the piss, that's him saying, you know what, I'm a survivor and I'm going to do what it takes. And that's that moment of defiance and him knowing he can do it and withstand things, I think will lead to Saul Goodman being less comic and still comic, but less comic and a little stronger, and Jimmy being a little more confident when he needs strength to be Saul Goodman.
Well, and Lalo sees it in him. And so he told Kim, he's like a cockroach. He's a survivor.
Cucaracha.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't know why I laugh.
You were feeling musical.
I know.
I didn't mean to stop. I didn't mean to say that so, like, hoity-toity. You can be as musical as you fucking want, Scott. You're free.
Well, I'm just hoping I've been muting the. I think I keep forgetting to mute the microphone because I think part of me has been a bit more musical than I prefer it to be for the last 20 minutes. So.
I thought that was thunder. I thought that was thunder and lightning, but I think
There's been some thunder going on in this chair. So.
We've hit all the stops.
More like a foghorn, or if you're an Arrested Development fan, like a rape horn. Anyway, why did I go there? I don't know why I did that.
it was nice seeing the cousins again, and it was kind of that fun scene where like Saul was rehearsing what he was going to say to them, and then they just like didn't give a fuck at all and just left.
It's really great seeing somebody that's as chatty as he is, like, try to have a connection, even brief, to people who just don't speak.
I just kept thinking, like, someone who lives where he does and the clients he's had, you'd think he would have who would have a smoother way with the accent at this point. But yo soy abogado, abogado, lawyer. I am the lawyer. Wow. So when that shootout started, did you all assume it was Mike from the get-go doing the shooting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
No. I thought the cousins what?
That's what I thought. I thought the cousins had dropped him the money and were laying in wait.
Nice.
I knew Mike right from the word go. I said, "It's Mike." And then I expected Saul to pull Jesse and slide under the car, but he didn't.
Well, you're very perceptive when you're not high as fuck while watching the episode.
It's a whole other world. It's a whole other world.
I will say that the show is so technically excellent. Did you all notice the first shot that it hit the guy and then you heard the sound?
No, I don't remember. I have only watched. Unfortunately, I only watched the episode the one time. I haven't watched it a second time. Although I feel like I should have now.
Which is interesting because from a certain distance, a sniper shot that's fairly accurate.
Like a ricochet or like a delayed sound?
No, like the sound of the gunshot will travel slower than the bullet, and the bullet will get there before the sound. And so the first guy, when he gets shot, he gets hit, and then you hear the sound, like you hear the gunshot, which I thought, this show pays attention to all the little details that are so, not to slave over somebody getting headshot, but it's just, the impressive attention to detail they pay in this show is just they always surprise you.
Can we also address how his cup got shot? And I feel like it was really significant that his cup got shot, that he went to save it. This cup of a hole.
All the cups are important. All the cups are important.
Davis and Maine and second best lawyer.
Yep. Filled with piss. Big old hole. Yeah. Those are good things in a cup.
And if you drank that coffee which was let out by the hole in the cup, it would have dehydrated him a little bit because that's what coffee does. So that's probably a good thing, right?
That's true. It does dehydrate you. That is correct.
So the coffee cup was half full, right, Dan? Not half empty.
God, I hate this podcast. So do you now? Not since the show, hopefully, generally does not tend to be super heavy-handed about things, either this or its predecessor. Should one not look at the getting rid of the Suzuki esteem, not the Subaru esteem, like I wrote in my notes because I'm stupid because I don't know shit about cars apparently. But do you think the whole abandoning that and tossing it over the edge or whatever is also kind of one of these little, oh, look, here's a literal thing of him, like, further shedding the Jimmy McGill persona. He's getting rid of the car, which everyone identifies as the Jimmy car. So, and maybe that means the Cadillac will be the next thing, which is most definitely a Saul car, so to speak. Or am I reading too much into that?
No, I think it was definitely a part of this. I think we were supposed to pick up on that.
Oh yeah.
I did kind of like how it was like it's such a mediocre car, and instead of like the classic like film like pushing it off a cliff, they just like push it off like a 10-foot arroyo, and it like just doesn't fall the first time. It's just it's such a pathetic discarding of a pathetic car.
Yeah, we don't get like a little fireball from the car either. It's like blink. I also, even though we've seen him in the outfit before, so it was nothing new. I do love that you have characters who would go out of their way to look like really like cool and sharp and be like the badass hitman, whatever. I love that Mike can just wear like that big old floppy hat and whatever. he doesn't give a he don't give a fuck.
As soon as I saw his practical, uncool outfit, I was like, it's Dan. That's Dan. Always wearing practical, uncool outfits in the desert.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, being compared to Mike is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I'd take it and run with it.
Except for I think that Mike would be like, no, I'm not wearing Crocs. That's where he draws the line. Dan has not discovered that line yet.
Wait.
Jamie, I'll take you to the desert sometime. You can dress like somebody that like got rejected outside of a David Bowie concert in 1982, and I'll dress like I'm in the fucking desert, and we'll see who has a more pleasant.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to die. Not going. That's where I die.
Right.
No, I got some piss for you. You'll be fine.
All right, so my takeaway from that is I guess I'm not going to make fun of Dan wearing Crocs, so I won't do that. I thought only mothers of 7 in Walmart could wear Crocs, but okay.
Crocs are useful for a lot of situations, but hiking through a desert with cactuses is not a situation to be wearing Crocs. But it's good for a lot of other hiking type things, and for flying because your feet aren't going to be so fucking hot in them.
You bet. Cheesy thumb up.
Wait, we must be in the desert because I hear crickets now. I think. Anything else we wanted to talk about with this episode? Because feel free, we could throw a few more minutes on here. I don't care.
Jimmy trying to bury the money with like an ineffective license plate shovel is pretty cool.
I did enjoy Jimmy's constant complaining, which was understandable. I loved him bemoaning the fact that they no longer have the $1,000 bill because it would make so much more sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
I loved the trying to dig with the license plate too, because it was yet another one of those situations where Mike goes, "It's not going to work."
That's true.
Oh, that reminds me of the thing I sent you guys.
There we go.
I was curious watching the show that even if you just did $100 bills, that to make $1 million, that would weigh 154 pounds.
7 million.
Yeah, 7 million. Sorry, it would weigh 154 pounds. And listening to the Insider podcast, it's interesting. Odenkirk insisted they put 50 pounds in those duffel bags as he carried them across the desert during the filming. But I was curious. It did look like those bags had some weight to them. But you could imagine adding 154 pounds, and that's at a minimum, because as you could tell from where the bills fell out, they were different denominations. They weren't uniform, that that would be quite a task to do. So I think in the end, dragging the money, getting the money there, Jimmy doing what he did. I mean, I think he got Mike's begrudging respect and probably learned a thing or two about himself that will lead us to, I guess the question is, where they left it. I'm really curious how Jimmy explains it. How does Kim react and what happens? Like, I can't wait till next week to see what happens.
Absolutely. I actually read a bit more of that interview with Vince Gilligan, and they were talking about the bags. Because I don't listen to other podcasts because I only believe this just our podcast and no other ones. So so I read the thing about the 50 pounds in the bag. So he was definitely carrying a heavy weight. But then they're talking about how it's like Owen Kirk. He's in shape, but he's not. Basically, over the course of time, each day they started I believe the article says they started taking some weight out of the bags each day, just making it a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, because it was just wearing on them too much. Because they're filming for hours upon hours there. So I like the idea. I love the idea that maybe by the time they finished filming, he had maybe 2 pounds in each bag instead of 50. They still look like Nerf balls or something. But yeah, I am. I think anyone who's watching the show is looking forward to the next. Well, we got 2 more this season, so we're definitely looking for how things are explained in the next episode. Because the only thing I've seen in the teaser, or the only thing I paid attention to, because I didn't really want to spoil too much, was him basically hauling all this money into the office to pay the bail, and having them all counting out the money for the $7 million there or something. But I haven't seen anything else, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. But I look forward to every episode. So yeah. But.
Yeah, I think it's the title. I don't remember what the one is next week, but I've seen the season finale is called Something Unforgivable. And last season we had Something Stupid. I just got the Sinatra song in everybody's fucking head. And there's one called Something Beautiful too. So this Something Unforgivable sounds very foreboding.
Oh no, there's going to be something bad. Let me see. The next week's episode is called Bad Choice Road. Nothing I could read into that title. Actually, I'm just gonna look ahead and see if. Thomas Schnauz directed it. Who wrote it? Schnauz wrote it also. Oh, interesting. Okay. Means nothing to anybody. Okay, so definitely looking now. Hopefully, we hope that unlike a lot of the season, we hope to do separate podcasts for each of the next 2 episodes, because I think we kind of want to have the finale be on just by itself on a podcast. So so assuming that we're all okay next week, and life doesn't get in the way, which especially in this age of horrors that we're all dealing with, one never knows. But hopefully we'll all be okay, and we can regroup next week for the penultimate episode, so that way the following week we will be serving up the finale season finale of Better Call Saul at that point.
And Brian and I will have to give you our weather forecast for the week, so we can pick the least likely to have a tornado day in Tornado Alley.
I usually don't have this problem, but tonight's, as you can hear the rumble in the background, it's kind of rumbly. So
yeah, I just looked at our next our 6-week blog or whatever, and it's every week for the next 6 weeks. I'm like, woohoo! Here it is! Yay!
Whee!
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can work something out, because I don't remember the last time me and Dan did Better Call Saul without anybody else involved in the podcast, so it would be too weird. It'd be strange. We'll just have to do impressions of the 2 of you or something and fake it if that happens.
Just say yep a lot. Just say yep a lot for me. Make fun of Dan occasionally. You got it covered.
Oh, yeah, you betcha. That Dan's a real hoser, eh?
We should just grab some sound.
I've never, ever spoke with that accent my entire life. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't think that's true. But I was thinking of you. I was watching that 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri today. I was like, oh, Missouri, it's where Jamie is. I wonder if she's like these people. Anyway.
Yeah. It's more like the Ozarks meets Tiger King around here. So.
Okay.
Like a mix of those two things.
Oh, yeah. And there's still a very good chance we're going to do an Ozark podcast, depending on when some people finish watching it. I think me and Dan have actually both watched it now, right, Dan? You finished it, didn't you?
And I think Brian too, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
I've got like 3 episodes left. I'm almost there, though.
You got 3 real good episodes to look forward
yeah.
to.
Yeah, it was actually thanks to the medication that I've had to take over the last week, thanks to my tooth deciding to wait until the actual worst time in human history to need dental work, modern human history. I had to have this tooth pulled, so I've been on lots of meds. But between Ozark and Saul, I've gotten a lot of storylines mixed up because there's like a lot of things that are crossing over, which is why I just kind of had to rely on your notes for last week's episode.
It's okay. You're forgiven. You're like that. You're not. We can't expect you to be like the Laura Linney in the Ozark. You're more of a Skylar. It's okay.
Oh God, that hurts.
Darlene.
No. Oh wow. Ooh, no.
I would rather be a Darlene than a Skylar. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Darlene, no.
Just saying.
Not Darlene. Darlene takes care of shit, man.
You mean, you don't know.
Maybe
I do when I'm being tooth medicated.
Maybe Darlene on like Roseanne or something.
Hey, she's pretty cool.
Or Darlene on Mr. Robot or something. Wow, there's a lot of Darlenes now that I think about it. Jesus.
That's really
strange. Anyway, okay, we actually did run a little longer than I expected, so I'm gonna start wrapping things up here. So if y'all, oh wow, hanging out with you two too long. If you enjoyed this podcast, and what's wrong with you? Anyway, you'll probably enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page. It's the Serious TV Drama podcast page. Like the page and join the conversation about shows like Better Call Saul and so many others. You can also subscribe to our feed via iTunes. Punch in Serious TV Drama Podcast. Subscribe to the feed, and you can also rate and review us there. Just don't hold our pregnant pauses against us. You can also just Google us, and you'll find us 18,000 other places. Well, we're even on YouTube sometimes, even though they ban us in lots of countries because we use music that we shouldn't. But we're not getting paid for it, so who cares? And finally, you can follow us on the Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD. Wait, did I get that right? Whiskey. At STVD Podcast. STVD as in Serious TV Drama Podcast. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting. We got an email address in case anyone ever wants to email us, and not including people like you guys because I'll ignore those. What's our email address? stvdpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, chances are I'll forget the password to access it, so it probably doesn't matter, but you can still try it. Maybe I'll find it like in 2 years or something.
And you're going to get on there these days. There's going to be like 30 messages on there at least that you haven't tapped into. You've missed so many opportunities.
Now it's probably going to be
by not remembering the password.
It's going to be like messages from webcam girls from like 4 years ago or something. No, hey, honey, what you up to? I'm ready and waiting.
Really hard-hitting, important stuff, Scott.
I bought new toys. Anyway, so what are these balls for? So anyway, with all that said, thank you guys for hanging out with us. It was nice to have all 4 of us here together. My apologies, Jamie. I think it's funny that we started off the podcast with my internet going down, and then Brian had some issues at the very beginning as well before we started recording, and then you're the one who actually ended up disappearing during the podcast. So
yeah,
I think
about right.
I think the jinx is we kept all the making fun of Dan's audio, and it's the 3 of us who all got screwed up at one point or another during the course of the evening.
Yep. We can't all be tin can gods. Not all at once.
Tin can gods. Well,
it's a great band name.
It is.
Mm-hmm. I'm full of them.
I think they opened for that Bowie show in '82. So
I don't know. I wasn't allowed in.
Oh yeah, we were only like 2 then, so yeah.
Oh, I could have went. Anyway.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, there we go. High five. Oh, no touching. Never mind. So,
Pretty sure it's like 3. Sorry, I wasn't there yet.
All right. Fucking kids. All right, with all that said, good night to you guys, and good night to everybody out there, and you guys can say the rest of the good nights.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Rest in peace, John Prine.
When I get to heaven, I'm going to shake God's hand, thank him for more blessings than one man can stand. Then I'm going to get a guitar and start a rock and roll band. Check into a swell hotel. Ain't the afterlife grand? And then I'm going to get a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm going to smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm going to kiss that pretty girl on the tilt-a-whirl, 'cause this old man is going to town. Then as God is my witness, I'm getting back into show business. I'm going to open up a nightclub called the Tree of Forgiveness and forgive everybody ever done me any harm. Why, I might even invite a few choice critics, those syphilitic parasitics, buy 'em a pint of Smithwick's and smother 'em with my charm. 'Cause then I'm going to get a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm going to smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm going to kiss that pretty girl on the tilt-a-whirl. Yeah, this old man is going to town. Yeah, when I get to heaven, I'm going to take that wristwatch off my arm. What are you going to do with time after you bought the farm? And then I'm going to go find my mom and dad. And good old brother Doug, well, I bet him and cousin Jackie are still cutting up a rug. I want to see all my mama's sisters, 'cause that's where all the love starts. I miss them all like crazy. Bless their little hearts. And I always will remember these words my daddy said. He said, buddy, when you're dead, you're a dead peckerhead. I hope to prove him wrong. That is, when I get to heaven. 'Cause I'm going to have a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm going to smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm going to kiss that pretty girl on the tilt-a-whirl. Yeah, this old man is going to town. Yeah, this old man is going to town.